Alrighty, so we're going to solve new site number 2. And new site number 2 is going to build off of new site number 1. New site number 3 builds off of new site number 2. New site 4 builds off of 3, so on and so forth until we get to new site number 6. So yesterday with new site number 1, the whole purpose of that was to learn how you pass in props from one. Pause recording. All right, so yesterday we were talking about new site number 1, and the purpose of new site number 1, all it was basically, how do I pass in props from one parent class into another? And we figured that one out based on the PRs that I've been seeing. And that was all that we were trying to do with new site number 1, which is just pass props from one place into another, create like an array of items that you're going to push out onto the screen, and how do I do conditional rendering. With new site number 2, we're going to be building something else. We're going to be trying to add some Bootstrap to make it look a little bit nicer. We're going to have this idea of what's called a React router. So this is very similar to urls.py. So how do we create routes within our app.js? And then we're going to create actual page components, because right now inside of app.js, it holds everything inside of there. That's kind of what I hope to get. So all the code that I'm going to be saying, you can kind of follow along on a separate screen if you'd like to, but I'm just going to jump over here to new site number 2. So first things first, it tells me that I need to copy over some files from my old new site number 1 and bring it into new site number 2. And each day the instructors will post their particular solution, so if you want a good place to start, just go ahead and copy that down. So if I go back out one level and I list out everything, I've got new site number 1 cloned down. And then jump into new site number 1, and I have my own solution here. Let me open that up within this window. Now my solution was a little bit different, so I'm going to jump inside of source, into components. Oh, all my stuff is gone. Oh, I moved it yesterday. Okay. Well, let me go out one level. Let me remove new site 1. And I'm going to clone new site number 1 back down and then check out to my branch. All right, so I'm going to clone down new site number 1 from Lima Platoon. I'm going to cd into new site number 1. And then I'm going to do a couple things. If you jump over to new site number 1, let me just go back, you'll notice that there's this concept of branches. So there are 2 branches. There's John's solution and then there's solution. These 2 branches live off of Lima Platoon. So if you wanted to grab my code from the command line, all you got to do is do git fetch origin John's solution. What this is saying, hey git, I want you to fetch, which means I want you to get from the origin. Remember, origin is where you cloned it from, so it's going to be Lima Platoon over here. Fetch a branch called John's solution and git checkout to John's solution. Notice I'm on the master branch to begin with. So this runs through. It grabs the branch called John's solution that's based off of origin, and it checks out to that particular solution. And you'll notice that I've got my components that look a little bit different from everyone else's. Ooh, that's not what I want. For now, let me just, I'll review what I did in mine in just a little bit. For now, I need to move over components over from new site number 1 into new site number 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the GUI because I am lazy. I'm just going to grab component appNav, article, and article teaser. I'm just going to drag it into new site number 2, go into source, go into components, and drop it off here. Also, I need to grab my app.js, which is kind of like the whole brains of the whole application, drag it inside of app source.js, and then replace the old one. Cool. So I've just moved over all the files I need to move over from new site number 1 to new site number 2. I'm going to cd at one level, cd into new site number 2, and open that inside of VS Code. Let's take a look at what I've got here. So in my components, mine look a little bit different. So I'm going to bring over my appNav, I'm going to bring over my article, and I'm going to bring over my article teaser. All right, let's start with app.js so that we're all on the exact same page. So app.js is basically my entry point into my entire app. It holds all of It basically is kind of like your urls.py that leads to the views.py. So it does all of like the heavy lifting for me. Now this app has a giant constructor that basically keeps track of a bunch of stuff for state, which we're going to move out eventually. It renders out an app-nav component, an article teaser, and an article. I didn't change that much about app.js over here. So let's jump over into app-nav. Mine looks very similar to everybody else's. I'm importing React and specifically the component library from the React NPM library. AppNav is going to extend from component, means that it inherits from component. And I've got this method called create nav items that I call on line number 15. Now, what I'm doing that's a little bit different is that I am deconstructing the props that are passed down so that I don't have to do this.props every single time on line number 5. Now, let me split the screen, and I can show you exactly what's happening here. So on my left, I've got app.js, and on the right, I've got appnav.js. In app.js, I'm passing in two properties down. I'm passing in nav items, and I'm passing in handle nav click. What happens here on line 5 is when I do const and then inside of curly braces nav items and handle nav click, it looks inside of this.props for a key called nav items, which we pass right over here on line 67. And then it also looks for a key called handle nav click, which is also right over here. This allows me to deconstruct them right away so that I don't have to do this.props.something, this.props.something. It saves me a little bit of time that way. And then everything else looks more or less the same. I'm going to map over each nav item. I should probably use this particular index. Let me just change that. Key equals I, so I can get rid of this. And then I return out an href on the very top. And at the very bottom here within my render function, I just create a bunch of nav items using the function that I've got up here. The same thing happens inside of article. Mine looks a little bit different, but it's the same concept. So let me drag this over here to the right. App.js passes, what is this? Can someone explain to me what these 3 dots are? Let's go with Joel, because I see you.
So that's the spread operator.
Tell me a little bit, what does that mean for like a 5-year-old?
I was a 5-year-old. I don't understand it well enough for a 5-year-old. But as far as I understand it, it kind of does the same thing that you did for the prop. It passes down everything that we have as a article.
Yeah.
And kind of passes it down separately, like in little bits.
Yeah, that's exactly
pass
it.
down the title.
Yeah. So we could do 2 things here. Let me just copy and paste, even though I know this will break. I could do 2 things. I could do article equals there are 2 ways of passing down all of the properties and all the things that article needs from app.js. One of them is here on line 80 using what's called a spread operator that Joel talked about. Another one is just passing it down directly as a prop. Now, when I pass it down directly as a prop, like I have on line number 81, whenever I want to reference it, I would have to do this.props.article.title, this.props.article.created-date, this.props.article.byline. And you can kind of see like even as I'm saying it, there's going to be more and more repeated code over and over again. Because you have to do this.props.blah, this.props.article.something else. So what we've got instead is we've got what's called a spread operator. A spread operator takes the contents of the object itself and just spreads it out. So kind of think of like I have a knife. I'm going to go get myself I'm going to make myself a peanut butter sandwich. I stick my knife inside of the jar and I spread the contents out. It's still like, instead of putting the tub of peanut butter directly on the bread, I take the contents and I put it out on the bread. Article is found from this.state. That's kind of what we were doing a little bit here on the right side. So inside of this.state, which is right there on line number 13, this giant thing from line 13 all the way down to line 56, there is an article object that's on there. And each one of those articles have an ID, and a title, an abstract, a byline, all of this over here. It has all of these contents. So what happens with the 3 dots down here on line number 80 is it says take all the contents and just spread them out right over here. So instead of passing this entire object, I'm just passing the contents of the object itself. And that's kind of what we've got. So what I'm doing is similar to line number 60 over here. I am taking the title, the created date, the byline, the image, the abstract, the title, the abstract, the byline, the image, the created date. I'm taking all of those things directly from props and then creating variables out of them a little bit earlier and then rendering them out to the screen. And then same thing with article teaser. I won't go into that one anymore. What you'll also notice inside of my code is that I've got a separate section on the bottom that you can look at where I create all of these article classes as functional components. So a little bit of background, and then I promise we'll jump into news site number 2. Facebook created React, not even 5 or 6 years ago. And then there was a period of time where everyone was trying to create like the newest, coolest JavaScript framework. So I remember in 2014, it was like, there was literally a website called the number of days since a new JavaScript framework. And I think the largest one was like, the longest they went without it was like 50 something days. Everyone was trying to create like the next JavaScript framework. And then finally Facebook came out with React, and then everyone kind of settled on React because when you have a large company backing a particular technology, it'll be around for a long time. So Python's really important right now because pretty much everyone uses Python, and the biggest driver for a long time was Google, and then Python kind of settled in. Java, Oracle created, I think Oracle or Sun Microsystems created Java, and then there's a lot of companies using Java, and that's why it's around. Same thing with React. The only reason React is super popular and has stuck around, because there are other really good JavaScript frameworks that are around, is because Facebook is backing it, and because Facebook backs it, everyone wants to use it. For a long time, all the code that was written inside of React was using what was called class-based components. And class-based components have the concept of state, which means that each individual component can keep track of how many things there are. Let me show you an actual example. Instagram.com. I will bring it over in just a second. One second. Okay, that's not what I want. Is there anybody on Instagram that people follow that you want me to use as an example?
Jason Fried, if he's on there.
What?
Is DHH on there anymore?
He's not there anymore.
Eddie Hall.
Eddie Hall, my man. Do like Eddie Hall. All right, so when we take a look at Instagram over here, Instagram is a React app. 100% it is a React app. And what you'll notice is that there's reusable components on every single app. So when I talk about components, it's things that we can reuse over and over again. Each one of these components has a certain amount of state. So if you think about this, all of these are exactly the same. These are all picture preview components. And each one of these picture preview components has its own state because it keeps track of this particular photo, the most recent one that Eddie Hall put out, has a certain amount of likes. It has a certain number of comments on inside of here. This one has a different number of likes and a different number of comments. So if we take a look at each one of these individual components, these picture preview components, has its own state. It keeps track of something and doesn't interact with the other ones. And that's the idea behind what I want to call state here. But if you take a look inside of article doesn't need to keep track of anything. It literally just displays stuff and doesn't do anything else. And what happened was, I think last year, they started using what's called functional components. It looks very similar, but slightly different. Let me just copy this over into a file right over here. Let me change it to JavaScript, cool. What you'll see on the left and right, on the right side, we've got class components, and on the left, we have functional components. On the right side, with class-based components, you generally use this when you want to keep track of state, when state is something that you're going to change based off of events that you do inside of your application. On the left side, we've got functional components. That's what we generally use now when we just want to display information. So on line number 1, we import React from React, similar to line number 1 over here. We're not inheriting from components, so we don't inherit this section on the functional component here. So I'm just bringing in the React library from React here. Then I've got a function called article instead of a class called article. It takes in a whole bunch of stuff. Title, created date, abstract byline. That's kind of what I've got here on line number 5. So it's saying this .props is going to be passing in. I expect to see title, created date, abstract byline, and image. And then instead of having a render method, all they have is a return, and it's the exact same code that goes in the middle here. So if you have a function, if you have a component inside of React that's just going to be displaying information, the new way of doing things is going to be using the functional-based components instead of the class-based components. Classes will be supported forever because there's a lot of code written in React already, and this is what's called legacy code. But whenever you start writing new React code and you're not worrying about state in any way, meaning you're just displaying information, you don't have to worry about, if I click the heart, do I need to update them? Like if I go back to Eddie Hall, and I go here and let's say that I want to like his photo. If I click on this photo, well, I have to be logged in, and I click the little like button, you'll notice that the number over here is actually going to increase right away. So that's an idea of state. Something changed on this particular component. That doesn't apply here for article because, again, we're just displaying information. So when you get a chance today, please check out my pull request for new site number 1. It is right over here. And inside of there, I have solutions in both class-based components and functional-based components as comments right afterwards. With that, let's jump back over and let's start with new site number 2. All right, let's see, are we inside of new site number 2? All right, so the first things that we wanted to do is we brought over the article component, the article teaser component, the app-nav component, and we brought over app.js. Next, because I know that I'm going to want to style this a little bit later, I ran npm install bootstrap -- save. I installed Bootstrap and Reactstrap, and to save some time with you all so that you didn't have to watch me do this, I already did it before class. All right, so if all goes well, let me just run npm start to start my server. This is the same thing as Python manage.py run server. Sure, I'd like to do that. And let's grab over localhost 3000. Let's pull it over here. So I cloned down new site number 2. I brought over all my code from new site number 1. I started everything, and it should look hideous just like this. So yours should look just as bad as mine. I'm going to make sure that all the things work as I expect. So I'm going to open up my Chrome tools by running Command Option I, or just right-clicking, and then doing inspect, and then this will show up. Now, if I remember correctly from yesterday, all that I want to do is I've created my components. I'm going to click on Home, all of these up here, and make sure that when I click on them, it actually keeps track of the one I'm talking about. Same thing with the article teaser. All right, I'm just going to keep the ID right over there, and I'm keeping track of how many times I've actually clicked it, which works for me. All right, so everything works as expected. And what you'll notice is that if I go back to localhost 3000, and I click on any one of these links, it all of a sudden just kind of adds a hashtag to it, which I'm not really sure why that is. So let's take a look. We've got our article teaser component, and when I click this link, it adds a hashtag at the very end, which I don't really want. I want to actually send it to an actual like RESTful route, something like maybe /articles/articles/1. Like I want to go over here. But right now when I click this, it takes me to a hashtag. Let's chase that down. We know that everywhere starts with app.js. It looks like there's an article teaser component. It looks like there is an article teaser, and we're passing down article ID, title, created date, and handle title click. So if I jump inside of this article teaser and inside of VS Code, this I like to use this one. I just jump over to definition. Oh, and it says right here that whenever I click on this, it takes me to this hashtag here. It's probably fine, but I want to prevent this from ending up inside of the URL. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this code just a little bit. Whenever I click on something, this is an event handler. It's going to take in an event. It's going to do two things. First things first, I want it to stop it from whatever it's doing. So I'm going to do event.prevent default. Its default behavior in this particular case is when I click on this, it appends a hashtag to the very end. And I want to prevent that from happening because I want to send it to a different URL later in this challenge. So the first thing I'm going to do is whenever I click on this, it takes an event, and I want it to stop it from doing that thing. So I'm just going to say prevent default, and then I'm going to say then handle the title click. If this works, I'm going to jump back over to this main page over here. When I click on this, it will both console log the number of the article that I'm talking about, but it also won't put anything at the top right over here. Let's see if this works. And you can kind of see a little bit earlier, whenever I clicked on this, it immediately followed with a hashtag like that. So now, because I added this event.prevent default, it does not do that. Any questions so far? No? All right. This next thing is when we take a look at all the code that we've got over here inside of source, there is a components folder. Each one of this components folder kind of holds all the components inside of it, kind of like when we had like templates with folders inside of there. It just kind of kept track of all the views that you were going to have. And we've got a brand new one. It's called article list. Let's take a look at it. All right, so it looks like article list right now doesn't really do anything. It's importing from React. It takes in a component library from the React NPM module. All those modules are found over here. And it looks like we're going to be rendering some article teasers, but we're not using it anywhere yet. And what you'll notice between the difference between line 1 and line 2 is that line 1 is like not, it's like more bolded than line 2. Line 2 looks like it's kind of like a ghost. And this is something that VS Code gives to you for free. Whenever you have something and it's not used, you can kind of see when I hover over, it says article teaser is declared, but its value is never used. It's saying like, you've imported this, but you're not using it anywhere. So if I wanted to remove this, I could, because it's not going to affect anything else within my particular app. All right, so we've got a new component. It's been stubbed out. It's this article list. And instead of showing like a random article, so if I jump back over here and I refresh, it's got like a random article every single time. You can kind of see it's changing. Instead of showing some sort of random article, I want the home page, this main page over here, to show a list of article teasers. So with that, I want to take in some props, and then I'm going to basically create a bunch of article teasers from there. So according to our curriculum for today, the props for article lists, we're going to take in something called articles, and we're going to take in something called handle title click. Those are the things that are going to get passed in. And I'm using this notation again, just so that I don't have to type in this.props to articles, this.props to handle title click. What's happening here is I'm creating two variables. One of them is called articles, the other one's called handle title click, that basically looks inside of props and finds articles and finds handle title click. According to the curriculum, it also says the article list component should receive an array of articles from news.js, okay, or wherever that means. And we want to map over the article array and to create a bunch of article teasers. And each one of those article teasers requires a certain thing. Each one of them requires an ID, a title, a created date, and a handle title click. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy a bunch of code from a bunch of places and kind of piecemeal together my article list. So I'm going to bring this into article list. Maybe I'll just put that down over here. And I know that I'm going to get a whole list of articles. And I think I've done this before. I think inside of AppNav, I look over here, it looks like instead of creating a bunch of nav items, I'm going to create a bunch of article teasers. So I'm going to copy pretty much all of this, or I'll just split it to the right for now, so I don't have to copy and paste and remove things. I'm going to do something very similar inside of here. So I've got my articles. Great. Let's see. Let's say create something called create article teasers. And I am just going to grab all of this, copy and paste it here. And I have to change these two values. Instead of doing nav items and handle nav click, I'm going to change it to articles and handle title click. I probably don't need it down here anymore. And inside of article teasers, I'm going to grab my articles, I'm going to grab my handle title click. I'm going to iterate over each one of them and create a bunch of article teasers. So I probably need to pull this into here. And I will probably need to change a few things. So instead of iterating over nav items, I'm going to iterate over articles. Each one of those articles, I'm going to iterate over each one. Maybe I'll call it article. And then I've got this index right over here. And the ID, articles may not have IDs here, so I'm just going to put the I. And I think everything else remains the same. I've got the title, I've got the article date, and the handle title click is going to take in an article ID, and then console log article ID. And then finally, at the very bottom here, I think all I got to do is just do this dot create article teasers. And let's just see if this does anything to my site. Refresh the page, and you'll notice that nothing changes, which is to be expected. We haven't hooked up the actual pages quite yet. So if I click on this, it'll still console log everything the way that I expect. And then this next section here, where we're going to start actually hooking up the pages. So all I've done so far, if I open a new terminal window and I run git status, all I've done here is I've added I've changed a little bit in this article list, and I've copied over my app.js from yesterday. Those are the only things I've changed so far. And this looks very similar to AppNav. I've just created a whole bunch of article teasers based off the properties that were passed in. And then I just said, hey, create a bunch of article teasers at the bottom. Let's talk about React Router. So right now, everything is coming from this one page. This one giant app.js is rendering everything out, and there are no additional pages. There's no other routes that are happening right now. There is a library called React Router. There is a library called React Router that is an open source, again, open source meaning that everyone in the community can see the code that happens underneath the hood. It's an open source library that allows us to take care of a bunch of routing. Now, we can read through all this documentation here. The documentation is very good, but just to kind of save us a little bit of time, I'm going to show you how to do it. So first, let me kill off this server right over here by doing Command-C. Clear the screen a little bit to give myself more real estate. I'm going to run npm install react router dom --save. --save is important because I'm saving it to this particular project. As that installs, we're going to go to the top of app.js. This is where we're bringing in all of our stuff. So we're bringing in React and the component from the React npm module. We're bringing in news. Okay, that's fine. It looks like we're just doing a whole bunch of random article lookup right at the beginning, which makes sense. We're bringing in our own CSS file. We're bringing in all those navigation components, the app nav, the article teaser, and article.js. We're going to clean a bunch of this up pretty soon. But what we're going to do next is we're going to bring in import browser router as router. I'm renaming browser router as router here, and route from React Router DOM, the second choice right over here. Got a question in the chat. Let me take a look. I don't need --save. Nice. All right, so what I've got here on line number 2 is I'm importing a new routing system that I want to bring into this particular app.js. The way that I'm going to use it is I'm going to rewrite our render. Look at what we've got. We've got a lot of things. We've got article and nav items. Like app.js just does way too much stuff. We don't want everything inside of app.js. We've got an app nav component. We've got article teasers. We've got article components. Like there's a little bit too much here. I agree. We probably need the navigation on every single page. So that's why we're going to have this app nav at the app level. But I probably don't need this. And I probably don't need this at the bottom. So let me npm start real quick. And while I do that, I'm going to remove all of these lines. All right. And this is exactly what we see. This is where we started at the very beginning of the day. I want to keep this navigation component at the very top. But each one, like I shouldn't have article teaser on every page. I shouldn't have article on every page. It should just depend on the page that I'm on. So I'm going to get rid of all these. And then at the very bottom, I'm going to add some code from the curriculum. Let's go over this. So at the very top, all I've got is I've got app nav component, and I'm creating the navigation. And at the very bottom here, I've added these 6 lines. So I've got a router class. This comes from at the very top. Take a look at there's that browser router as router, and I've also got a route. I'm bringing in 2 external libraries from this npm module. So what I'm doing here is I'm registering routes for this particular React app. I'm bringing in specifically the exact path for slash and slash articles slash article ID. So similar to our urls.py, whenever anybody makes a request to slash, the component that's going to take care of it is homepage. Whenever anybody makes a request to slash article ID, article page is the thing that's going to take care of it. And what you'll also start to notice is that some of the things that were bolded before are starting to disappear. So you'll see that, okay, article doesn't really exist anymore because we're not using it anywhere else within here. And you can feel free to just delete those. I don't need that. It won't blow up my application. Let's see, is there anything else I can delete? Oh, at the very top, it looks like since I removed article and article teaser, these have become less bolded. And it says, if you hover over it, says, you've declared it, but you're not using it. And that makes sense. I'm not going to be using it within app.js, but I'll use it in other places. Let's go back to our app and see what we've got. Okay, so this is broken. Is it still broken? Maybe if I refresh 4 times, it'll go away. But it doesn't. Let's take a look. So online, it says failed to compile, and it tells you exactly which line it's broken on. Inside of app.js, on line 69, home page is not defined, and article page is not defined on line number 70. Really? All right, so 69 and 70. So it looks like the home page component that we're talking about, again, we called it, but it doesn't exist. I don't know where it is. Let's go over here. Let's jump inside of source. And before we do that, let's look at each one of these folders. So the Git Ignore, we all know what that is. It tells GitHub what to ignore when you're adding things to Git. Package.json is a list of all the packages that you need. It's basically, what I like to think of this is kind of like a ship's manifest. It keeps track of the name of your particular application, all the dependencies with the version numbers. So this is saying, hey, whenever you bring up this particular application, I need Bootstrap anything greater than or equal to 4.5.0. I don't know what enzyme is. It's probably something that Bootstrap relies on. I don't know what enzyme adapter is. It's probably something that enzyme relies on. All of these packages we need to install in order to actually run this. Package lock.json keeps track of all the versions. And then this readme know. Now, what you'll notice when you run npm start and npm install, you get this giant thing called node modules. Node modules is JavaScript code that we reach out to npm, we grab all the JavaScript code, and every single bit of JavaScript code that you need exists within this folder right over here. The idea behind like JavaScript frameworks in general is that in the past, the servers used to be taking care of everything. And what that means is whenever we made a request to some sort of website, like everything that changed was handled by the server. So whenever I went to Amazon.com or Instagram or something, what would happen is whenever I make a request, whenever I make any sort of change, the whole application would change. Like it would actually make HTTP requests for everything. But that's not terribly scalable. The issue behind that is that there's way too many people coming on the internet every single day, and every single person is hitting the changes on the back end inside of the server for every single thing. There's just too many people. But every single person has an iPhone or like an Android device. They have a mobile smart device, and each one of those is very powerful. It's basically its own individual computer. So anything that we can push off to the client to take care of, we can. And that's the idea here. We've got all the JavaScript code, so anything just to make the application run and to like take care of events and stuff is all going to be hosted on your particular machine rather than on the server itself. Public is the things that we see on the outside, and then we're inside of source right over here. And what we'll do is we'll go until 9. We'll take a quick break. If you take a look inside of my source file, this is where all of the code for React comes from. We've got our components, we've got our data, which we'll get into in a little bit, and we've got this brand new pages thing. This brand new pages folder keeps track of all of our pages, similar to all the templates that we have inside of Django. We've got article page that I'm going to open, and we have home page that we're going to open. Looks like home page is already stubbed out for us. And if you look inside of app.js, we're referencing home page on line 69, but we're not actually importing it anywhere. So from app.js, I've got to figure out how I'm going to get there. So let's do import homepage from, all right, so relative to where I am, app.js and pages is at the exact same level. So I'm going to do /pages, and you can kind of see it's already starting to autocomplete for me. That's something that VS Code gives to me for free, and I can just select homepage.js. All right, and you'll notice at the very bottom, it automatically refreshed the server, and it just says the article page is not defined. So I'm just going to bring in the same thing, double-click homepage, Command-D, separate cursors, article page right over here. If I jump back, you'll see that a little bit earlier when we created our article list component, this did do everything that we expected it to do. So if we go to just the home page, we render out a list of articles. Jump over to home page. So we start with app.js. Whenever anybody makes a request to / or just the root, the home page, it passes it off to home page. I jump over to home page. I've got a render right over here, which is going to bring out an entire article list. It passes down the articles, passes down the title click, and then it just says there's a random console log over here. Let's see if this works. Let's break, clear, and OK. If I just click on this, it keeps track of each individual article number that I click on. And that's kind of what we expect to see here. It says handle title click. It just says console log. Wait, that's not the right thing that shows up. Let's jump down into article list. So I pass down article lists, a list of articles, and I pass down handle title click. And what's happening here? Oh, it looks like this is console logging article ID, which is what we see over here. And instead, I probably want to do, let me do handle title click of article ID instead. Going back over the screen, clear this out to give a little bit more real estate. Click on this, and it says to do, use React Router's history.push to change the page to /articles/article ID. And if this works as well, if I've set this up correctly, whenever I make a request to /articles/1, just found right over here, /articles/some article ID, it takes me over to article page, which is open here on tab number 2. And all it should do is it should say article page. Let's see if it works. We've got our navigation component at the very top, and we've got article page showing up right over here. All right, let's take an 8-minute break. We'll come back at 9:05. Alrighty, 9:05. keep going. Okay, so I should probably. Oh no, I just hit record. All right, so let's continue on from where we were. We were at our home page. Slash. Now, our home page renders out this article list component right over here. It passes all the articles down as a prop. I'm taking from news right over here, which I can right-click here and go to definition. And it looks like it's just a giant file of JSON. It's just a giant array of objects. Now, what we've got to do here is right now when I click on this, nothing really happens. And that's kind of not what that's not really what we expect to do when we're talking about an application here. When I click on each one, it should actually go and redirect me to if this is a list of articles, I want to be able to actually go to each individual article page. But right now it just says to do, use React Router's history.push method to change the page to /article /article ID. Okay, so let's take a look. We've got handle title click and it says use React Router's history.push. When we take a look at app.js, we brought in a router class and the route class from React Router DOM. React Router DOM gives us something called this.props.history. What that means is it's able to keep track of our history within the browser and push us to a particular URL. So the way that I'm going to do that, I'm going to get rid of this for right now. I'm going to get rid of the console log altogether. I'm going to call this.props.history.push, and then I got to put this inside of curly brackets because this is interpolation here. When I click on this, it's going to take in the article ID, and it's going to push our history to /articles /article ID. That's what we've got right over here. It's going to push us to /articles /article ID. So let's see if this one works. Let me refresh the page here. Before, when I clicked it, it just says it had a console log. And hopefully, if this works well, I can click on this, and it takes me to an individual article page. It looks good to me. Let's click on this first one. We get pushed to article 0, which we should probably change a little bit later. You can kind of see we are actually being pushed into an article page, which works for me. You take a look here. We're taking in an article ID whenever we click on something, and then it pushes us to that particular article ID /articles / the thing that I clicked on. That article ID is passed up from article list as an ID right over here. It passes down into an article teaser. If I chase this all the way down, you'll see that when I handle the title click here, it takes in a prop called handle title click. When I click on this, it fires this off, jumps back up to article list, jumps back up to home page, and then it takes that article ID that I clicked on and then pushes us into that particular page. Now this lasts a little bit. Right now, if you take a look at /articles /some number, it's fine. I mean, it just says article page on it. But I want to actually render the actual article itself, as we see on line 2, using news.json, which we have here on line 3. Right now, it just says article page, and that's fine, but that's not exactly what we want to do. So I'm just going to push this over here. I think I need to probably render out the article. And this article, if I go back to page number 1, I lost it from a little bit earlier. Let's take a look at what article requires so that we can render out a specific article. Let me just jump over. All right, so an article requires a title, a created date, a byline, and an abstract. Okay, so let me just grab this here. And then all it does is it takes those particular props that are passed down and displays it out to the screen. So I'm just going to push that right over here and comment it out. Oops. So that I know that I need to grab these things. Now, article page right now doesn't say anything, but I can grab that URL, specifically the ID from the URL. Similar, remember when we were doing stuff with /cars/1 or something like that? We grabbed that number 1, we saved it as car ID. The same thing can happen here. When we take a look at app.js, we have /article /article ID. So I know that it's registered, that number that comes up right after /articles is registered as /article ID. So I can use this to grab the ID from the URL. And the way that I'm going to do that, if I jump back over to article page, is I'm going to say, I'm going to grab the article, I'm going to say const article ID is equal to this props match params article ID. So it takes in some props from the router. We're going to match those parameters to find the article ID. And once we get that, we're going to save that as the article ID right over here, and then we're going to do something else with it. So let's see if we can actually grab the article ID first before we do anything else. So I'm going to, inside my render, I'm just going to run console.log article ID, and let's see if it works. So I've got just the word hello that's going to show up on the screen. That's what we've got over here. And if I scroll up a little bit, there's all these warnings, all these warnings, all these warnings, but there's number 4. If I jump over here and you look at the very top, there's number 4. If I jump over to 100, again, this all it says is hello, but I did grab that number from the URL. Where's that 100? I see it right over there. Using the article ID, I can grab that particular news article from the news.json library. So using that, I'm just going to say const article is equal to news at article ID. And the reason I can do this is if you look inside of news.json, it's just a giant list. You can see it from the square brackets up here. And lists have indexes so that we can go through each one. Let's see if this one works. I was able to console log the article before. Let's see if I can console log the article itself before I continue down over here. All right, so I'm at 100. You'll see that it's undefined because it's probably too big. It doesn't exist within our list of articles. If I go over to number 1 and I scroll up, what you'll see is, there it is. There's that abstract EUM. I don't know, it's some Latin stuff over here. EUM QUI. Let's jump over here. And if we're looking at article number 1, if I can find it. Article number 1 is this one here, EUM QUI. So it is actually grabbing that particular article from the database, which is just a list of articles for right now. I've gotten the article ID. That's great. I have gotten the article itself. And then I know that each individual article at the very bottom needs a title, a created date, a byline, and an abstract. And since we learned how to do this a little bit earlier, let's just go ahead and spread that out. Let me get rid of this. Probably don't need the console log anymore. I'm not really using the article ID, so I don't need to really declare it as an actual variable. So I've got my article, and it's just saying news at this.props.match params article ID, and we're just rendering out an article. We saw that an article is going to take in a title, created data, byline, image, and abstract. So let's take a look. Hey, it seems to work for me. Let's go jump over to /articles. That doesn't do anything because it's not a defined route. Let's go to the home page. If I click this first one over here, it takes me to articles/0 and gives me the actual article itself. If I go back and I click on this next one, it takes me to articles/1, and it's all over here. Now, wait, something happened. So I've got my title. That's in H1. Yep. I've got my created date in a P tag. I've got my byline. Okay. I've got my abstract. I have no images for any of these. So if I go back to my page, let's try another one. There's no image. Try another one. There's no image. And this happens all the time in real life, is you had an API contract with your vendor, meaning like you expected it to be there at a particular place within. Remember when we were doing Ticketmaster, there was like that giant JSON response that came back, and we were finding this one exact thing to get like the location or the artist or something like that. Some person decided to change the image. The image has changed at this particular point. So let's take a look. So image has disappeared. Let's jump into news.json. Let's go into our first particular thing. And before we were grabbing stuff like image, there's that created date. We've got the byline over here. Oh man, there used to be an image tag right around here, but now it's been changed with multimedia. And multimedia has a whole bunch of URLs within it. So let's just grab that first one. So I'm going to do a couple things. I'm going to spread out the article, but I'm also going to add in a new image tag. It's going to be article. What is it? Multimedia at index 0, specifically the URL. Then I'll close this. And let's see if this works. So I'm spreading out everything that we have within the article, and I'm also passing in the image as a hard-coded thing because this is expecting an image. Let's see if this works. So I refresh, click on this first one here. There's my picture for articles/0, articles/1, articles/2. There's all those pictures from before. The last thing I want to fix today is this is a article 0. Like that's not a RESTful route. A RESTful route is like this number right over here basically determines which article you're talking about within a database. And right now we're not reading from a database, we're reading from a list. News.json is a list. So that's why we're able to go from 0. But 0 is not the greatest place to start because that's not a RESTful route because, again, database indexes don't start at 0. So what we're going to do is we're going to change a few things. Number one is that, let's see, let's start over here. I actually don't really know where to start. So we're at the home page here, and when I click on this thing right over here, it takes me to articles/0. All right, I don't want that. I don't want to go to /0. I want to go to /1. So if I start with app.js and I chase it all the way down, whenever I go make a request to just the home page, it takes me to the home page here on tab number 2. When I click it, it's going to push me over to /articles/article ID. Oh, okay. So it looks like this is as easy as just doing +1. So whenever I click on a particular article, it'll take me to that article, like to this particular URL, articles +1. Let's see if this works. All right, so I've got expedita over here, and when I click on it, it takes me to /articles/1. But there's a bug because I'm missing, these things don't match. When I click this, I actually go to the second one. And that's easily solved by going over to the article page. I've got this article. I'm going to grab the article ID, and here I'm just going to do -1. See if it works. Let's go back. If I click on this first one, it takes me to expedita. If I click this one, it takes me to unqui, and so on and so forth. I will try to style with Bootstrap. I am not that good with this. This last part of the curriculum for today has some red errors in my console. Let's take a look. What are you? Each child in a list should have a unique key prop. Check the render method of article list for more information. All right, so let's jump over to article list. It looks like, I think I just need to add a key here. The key's not really used. Yep, and then it goes away. It still has the exact same functionality as before. Whenever you're iterating over, the reason why this is, whenever you iterate using, yeah, I know. Everyone can still see this, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Am I still recording? Yep. All right, so that'll be a nice gift for you. Whenever you're iterating over a collection of items, and you're creating like hrefs, or you're creating any sort of element on the screen, they also want the key to keep track of the index of the thing that you're iterating over. That's why that we need to pass in this key. We're not doing anything with this key, but they were angry before. That was where we had a red error. And then now that red arrow does not exist anymore. Last bit here, it's really hideous. It's not the nicest looking thing in the world. So we're going to try to style with Bootstrap. I am not really that good with Bootstrap stuff in general, but there is something called Reactstrap, which is a flavor of Bootstrap for React. And it makes it look a little bit nicer if we just, like, this is the example here. So we've got Reactstrap component. It looks like an actual navigation bar, what we kind of expect to see. But you can kind of even see examples of this right up here. And all the code that happens underneath the hood is down right over here. So what we're going to do first, let's jump back over, is I'm going to run npm install Reactstrap, and then I'm also going to do npm install Bootstrap. I've already done both of those things for you. So the next step for us would be to, if I can find it, I am going to import Bootstrap into my index.js page. Now, when we jump inside of source, at the very bottom, there's an index.js page. This is like the real main entry point of the app in the sense that it renders out the app component, and then all the heavy lifting actually happens inside of app.js. But at the very top level, it's index.js. That's the very first place that we're going to look. So I'm going to import Bootstrap after I run npm install Reactstrap and Bootstrap. I'm just going to start this up here. Now you can kind of see already that it's not a pretty looking app, but the moment I add Bootstrap already, just based off of like the way that Bootstrap runs things, it's going to look a little bit nicer. Looks a little bit nicer. I mean, it's not as black and white as it was before. So just by adding Bootstrap, there are some things built into the H1s and stuff like that, and the links that make it look a little bit nicer than what we had before. So we've got this right over here. I want the component, the app nav component, to be at the very top. I want to be able to remove this particular line of text and just have at the very top the home opinion looking pretty nice. So I'm not really great at front-end stuff. I've never been a front-end engineer in my time in the industry, but I think I can like kind of guess more or less. So it looks like there's Reactstrap, components, GitHub, and options. So it looks like all I want, maybe on the left side, I'll have like news site as the thing for Reactstrap. So let me just take a look for the word Reactstrap inside of this code block here. Where are you, Reactstrap? Do not embarrass me. Okay. It looks like there is a nav bar. We need a nav bar brand. It looks like that's something that's built into Reactstrap. And when I click it, it'll actually show something. So I know that at the very least, I'm going to need these two lines of code. I need nav bar and I need nav bar brand. If I'm jumping back over to here, it says app nav components. So I probably don't need this. I don't want to see the words app nav anymore. So let's just start real slow. I'm going to get rid of that, jump over here, and you can kind of see it is no longer there. I do want to add a horizontal rule after this, just to give some sort of separation on the page. So I go back, there's a little bit of separation, and there's the stuff at the very top. Cool. All right, inside of AppNav, I am going to, instead of doing a bunch of hrefs here, I'm just going to start copying and pasting and try to figure stuff out. So I know that I need this. So I need a div with a nav bar on the very top. Okay, I'm going to do a div. I know I'm going to need that right over here. And looks like I lost it again. All right. Looks like I've got my nav bar over here. This is going to this Reactstrap thing is going to correspond to this over here. Maybe I'll change it to something else. I'll change this to I don't know, Reddit 2.0. And then afterwards, we have a whole bunch of these things that we're looking for. I don't think I want this drop down. I just want the components in the GitHub. I want it to look a little something like that for each individual, like home and politics and for sports and all the topics that we see at the very top. So I'm going to look for the word components and the word GitHub. There we got components and we've got GitHub. I'm just going to grab this whole thing here. And looks like I do need a nav class underneath. I'm just going to grab this. Underneath there, I'm just going to add this. And it looks like each one of my nav items, I need to iterate over each one of them and then create nav items with nav links within them. So yeah, let's try that. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to paste it up here. I'm going to do /nav, and then I'm going to do, yeah, I think that should probably be it. And I'm going to create the nav items within there. So instead of returning what we see here with the A's, I'm going to change this up a little bit. I'm going to change this so that it is an href going to just slash. That's it, just to this for right now. And then I'm going to change this to from components to nav label. And then when I actually click on this, I'm going to grab this link and just put it right over here. So instead of doing a whole bunch of like A's, like an actual A tag, I'm going to create a bunch of nav item and nav link elements. I hope this works. I really don't know. Let me get rid of this and see if this works. It looks like it does not.
Parentheses around on line 8. When you return. On your return line,
Yep.
You need to put parentheses around the entire thing.
All right, let me see if I closed off everything before then. This. Maybe. I think something is broken down over here, actually. There's a unclosed nav bar.
Yeah, so line 15, the nav bar takes children, so that needs to be closed.
Failed to compile. All right, so we got a different thing. It says that nav link, I don't know, what's broken here? It seems like I'm referencing things that I have not imported at the very top. So this one's pretty simple. It should be import. And we're just going to go through it. Nav item, nav link, nav bar brand, nav from React strap, I think. Let's see if this works. Jump over. And we have, so it's better than nothing, right? Let me close out of the Chrome tool so it looks a little bit better. We've got an actual proper looking thing up here. You can kind of see there's that this like Reddit 2.0 that's in bold, kind of matches with our React strap that we've got over here. And we have each individual link rather than a whole list of like ugly things. And if hopefully this works, I'm going to go back over here and make sure all of our stuff is still working. I'm going to click on world, national, politics, and it keeps track of the thing that I actually clicked on. So this is kind of where I wanted to end today with news site number 2. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to start pushing this up so that you can see it as a pull request. So I'm going to clear this out. I'm going to check out to a new branch. I'm going to just call this John's solution. I'm going to run git status to take a look at all the things that I've actually changed. It looks like that I need all of these things. I might ignore the package.json, but I want to add everything else. Yep. And I'm going to do git add src because each one of these is appended with the src file because it's inside that folder except for package.json, and run git status again. You'll see that I've added all of the things that changed for today. I'm going to commit it with a good message saying add in solution with class components. I'm going to git push origin to John's solution. When this goes through, VS Code will tell you that you can open a new pull request right over here. I'm just going to follow that link. It's going to open it. Wrong window. And it looks like I had pushes less than a minute ago. I'm going to compare and pull request. I'm going to not open it against Kilo, but I'm going to open it against Lima. And I'm going to create this pull request over here. Before, you'll see that there were no pull requests. Now there is one. And sometime today, if you need anything, come over here and take a look at it. Any questions?
I have a question, John. When you did the imports for Bootstrap, the CSS files, I can't remember which file, app.js maybe?
App.js.
No, not those ones. The actual CSS for Bootstrap itself.
Yep. It's in index.js.
Because CSS, the order in which it loads matters, right? Does this matter, the position that you put this import and how it gets loaded into the DOM?
Yep, it is. Yeah, so you are correct. The line 4 being rendered before line 5, it is important. I don't actually know. I just kind of arbitrarily put it in. So let's find out. So let's see what it looks like as is. It's going to look something like this. I'm going to wait for it just to load. And then let's jump up one. See what happens. This is looking different. Looks the exact same. The reason behind that, I'm guessing, is if you go inside of index.css, there's nothing really in there.
Yeah, so if you Chrome inspect the DOM, I don't think I'm a fan of the way it's loading these in. I guess I got partial to linking my style sheets, but it loads them separately, like into the.
Yeah, it looks like this is all Bootstrap.
Yeah, I'm just I'm not sure on the order that it happens in, I guess.
I'm not sure. I'm not really a front-end guy. Don't really know too much about it.
It's only going to matter if you start writing like conflicting CSS. Like your Bootstrap, React Strap is reading from Bootstrap CSS file, and if you don't go overwrite them, it shouldn't really be a problem.
Yeah, and then it will be the last one that ran, right? Like the last style that was applied will be the one that gets applied.
Whatever one comes last takes precedence over the ones that come before.
Yeah. Okay.
Other question?
One question, I guess, I believe it's in the, I remember it's line 8 at one point. The article IDs, when we're incrementing and then we're also decrementing,
yep.
To pass it in, would it be simpler to when we actually assign and create the actual nav link? Well, at this point it's a nav link, but when we're originally creating the A tag to pass in, instead of assigning the ID to just be an I, could we just do ID is equal to I plus 1? And that would kind of take care of line 9.
Sure, let's give it a shot. Let's run npm start, and while I wait for that. So the idea here is, like, rather than doing -1 and +1, can't I just do article ID here? And then, let's see, articles, news. All right, so whenever I click on this, so I have to go into article list. You're saying, why don't you just have the ID be I plus 1 here? So that when you render the actual teaser itself, you don't have to.
Yeah, there's still one spot that might cause an issue where.
There it is.
Right there, line 7.
Let's see if this works. Refresh the page. This is taking me to /1. Yep. Nope. Nope. Something happened here. I think it's because, well, the thing is that news starts counting at 0, so I'm not sure that changing the ID there matters all that much. The ID. Yeah, I'm not sure it actually changes all that much. So this will take me back to 0. If I increase this by 1, that's great, but then I still have to take away because this starts counting at 0. I could do +1 there, and no, because so there's 2 issues right now. One of them is your URL has to start counting at 1, so you have to add 1 somewhere, because when you push the ID through, where am I pushing the ID through? Article list, article ID. No, I could do that there. Oh, that's what you meant. I could do. I can't change the argument that's coming in, but I can change that. And then could I get away with this? Let's find out. All right, let's go back over here, refresh the page. Nope. I mean, it's there's probably some solution to it. I don't want to troubleshoot in front of everyone, but yeah, there's probably a way to get around it. I just don't know what it is off the top of my head. Any other last?
I didn't really follow how match is being used on line 7. Match.params. How is that finding the article?
Sure, that's a good question. Number 7. Okay. So what's happening here is, do you remember when we were doing stuff inside of Django and we had like def, I don't know, like book list, and it takes in a request and then like a book ID or something, and then inside of like urls.py, oops, we had a views. Oh man, I can't type that here. Slash, I think it was like book ID or something, and then it would take me to like use book list, something like this. Basically what happens is that it registers it as like whenever anybody makes a request to /book ID, it passes you off to the book list method. It keeps track of that particular book ID and passes it in as a parameter, and then you're able to look up stuff like book.objects.get and then ID with book ID. This is obviously not going to run. The same thing happens here. What's happening is the way that we access the article ID from the URL is using this.props.match.params, and then you grab the article ID from the params. That comes from over here. If I look at line number 70 inside of app.js, I've got /articles/article ID. Whenever anybody makes a request with some number, that's saved as article ID. And then when I use it inside of article page, I match it from the URL. Cool. Any other questions? Alrighty. Let me stop sharing.